It has been said that nostalgia ain't what it used to be. But when it comes to nostalgia, then Christmas is surely the season for it. Allowing myself some Christmas nostalgia, I recently dipped into an anthology of British writing about Christmas. It contained all the usual ingredients that one might expect. Lots of village scenes and descriptions of countryside covered in snow, and of snuggling around an open fire eating mince pies, and Father Christmas coming in the dead of night and managing to get all his deliveries just right. I also read many accounts of people going out into the cold, traipsing through the snow, knocking on people's doors, singing carols and shaking a box into which appreciative donations would be placed without fail. And if the singers were especially lucky, they would also receive, say, a mince pie or a mug of mulled wine to shore up their energies and to help keep them warm. What struck me about such accounts of caroling was the spirit of hope that was communicated in them. Withstanding the inclement weather, they head out hoping to spread some Christmas cheer and perhaps earn some money either for themselves or for some good cause. I've done something along these lines myself here in Oxford a number of years ago, when a group of adults and children from Blackfriars went singing carols on a Friday evening on St. Giles, Little Clarendon Street, Walton Street and Jericho to raise money for a local charity. I remember our cold hands holding the sheets with the words of the carols. I remember stamping our icy feet to keep them warm. I remember the sleet blowing right into our faces, but most of all, I remember the spirit of hope and of good cheer underlying the chilly discomfort and the less than perfect music making. Now, the hope I have mentioned is an example of what we might call natural hope. Basically, ordinary human hope that our human actions will turn out well. But in caroling, another kind of hope is invoked. I mean, the kind of hope that is sometimes called theological hope or supernatural hope, and that is expressed in the words of the carols themselves. In this sense, hope is one of the theological virtues. It is understood by St. Thomas Aquinas as the expectation of a future good, of an ultimate destiny, that is the living presence of God with us, especially in relation to eternal glory. And this ultimate destiny for which we hope is something we are unable to attain by our own efforts, but which is a gracious gift from the God who loves us with a love beyond all telling. The carols often speak of Mary and Joseph going on a journey to the city of Bethlehem where the Christ child is to be born. They are a young couple with a mountain of cares on their shoulders, not knowing what the future has in store for them, and yet trusting in God. Their situation reflects something of the worries and fears and anxieties faced by so many in our time of COVID lockdown and restrictions. It could be people worrying about their health or the health of loved ones, or those who fear for their children and their opportunities, or those who have to face the challenges of unemployment and job insecurity, who have to struggle to keep up mortgage payments and who wonder if business will pick up. Behind all the lockdowns and restrictions, regardless of your views on the measures taken by government, behind the headlines and news bulletins, are people suffering, enduring sleepless nights, sick with worry, people who feel utterly powerless in the face of events, people feeling vulnerable, lonely, and cast to one side. In such context, any kind of hope is welcome. But there is a depth to theological hope that hope contained in the church's Christmas proclamation and in the Christmas carols, that transcends what natural hope can offer. Mind you, simply to assert this might seem a little too easy, the sort of pious formula of the churchman. But although some of what I read in the Christmas anthology I mentioned earlier might fall foul of this, some of the pieces I read managed to communicate very powerfully a sense of the reality and profundity of theological hope in the face of many challenges. Even anthologies of Christmas nostalgia can have hidden depths. An example that I found particularly moving is one that might surprise you. It comes from The Wind in the Willows, and this brings us back to the subject of Christmas caroling. The Wind in the Willows is one of those children's books that can operate on many levels, that can bring out the child in each one of us, but that also contains elements that respond to adult fears. Anyway, in the book there is a scene in which the two animal characters, Mole and Ratty, are lost in the snow. They come to a village, a human village, and look inside a house. They see people indoors as warm as toast, sitting around a cozy fire. But being mere animals, they have to continue on because they are not welcome among the humans, just as Mary and Joseph were not given shelter in the inn. In the end, they arrive at Mole's old home, which he had left some time ago. They find it cold and neglected. They were about to move on, but Mole is so lonesome for his former dwelling that they agree to remain. Somehow the two animals, Mole and Ratty, manage to make Mole's neglected house comfy. Then they hear something and look out the window. To their great surprise and delight, they see a group of field mice carrying lanterns, singing a Christmas carol. If you'll indulge me, I'll read out all the verses, though I thankfully won't inflict my singing upon you. It starts by speaking of carolers in the cold, which certainly gets my sympathy, and then brings things to a higher plane. Villagers all, this frosty tide, let your doors swing open wide. Though wind may follow and snow beside, yet draw us in by your fire to bide. Joy shall be yours in the morning. Here we stand in the cold and the sleet, blowing fingers and stamping feet. Come from far away, you to greet, you by the fire and we in the street, bidding you joy in the morning. For ere one half of the night was gone, sudden a star has led us on, raining bliss and benison, bliss today and more anon, joy for every morning. Good man Joseph toiled through the snow, saw the star o'er a stable low. Mary, she might not further go, welcome thatch and litter below, joy was hers in the morning. And then they heard the angels tell, who were the first to cry Noel, animals all as it befell, in the stable where they did dwell, joy shall be theirs in the morning. All the little animals, rat and mole and field mice, do not share the human nature of the incarnate Lord. These little animals are cast aside and treated as being of little or no value, shut out from the Christmas celebrations taking place in the village. But no matter. The birth of the Christ child brings light to all creation, human and non-human alike. Indeed, there is a tradition that comes from early in the church's history, that there was an ox and an ass present at the birth of Christ, and that they adored the baby Jesus, fulfilling the words of the prophet Isaiah. The ox knows its owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel does not know, my people do not understand. And this prophecy is echoed in that wonderful last verse of the Christmas carol sung by the field mice. The humble animals got it right. They were the first to proclaim the birth of Christ. And then they heard the angels tell, who were the first to cry Noel, animals all as it befell, in the stable where they did dwell, joy shall be theirs in the morning. A gospel passage that is read out at Mass on Christmas morning is the great opening of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word. There is no account of the birth of Jesus in the Gospel. It is almost like an antidote to Christmas nostalgia. It does not have a stable or shepherds or the Magi or even Bethlehem. Instead, it's all rather abstract, starting not in history, but in God himself. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But even if it lacks what have become for many the Christmassy touches of the narratives from the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, it conveys something just as beautiful. And this something is nothing less than a kind of inclusive cosmic vision that in God becoming human, the barrier between the divine order and their created order has been overcome. And so all creation with its joys and tribulations, with its humans and its moles and its rats and its field mice, are all part of the creation that is taken up into the great story of our salvation. And we see this because the opening of the Gospel of John links the coming of Christ with all creation without exception. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything that was made. So no one is excluded. No one is cast aside or treated as disposable. Instead, we are caught up in a sacred drama that in no way pretends that the sorts of things that keep people awake night after night or lead to feelings of low self-worth or of loneliness, that in no way pretends that these are not very real for many people, but it nonetheless reminds us of a bigger story that is not vulnerable to the travails of human life, but speaks of a love that is constant and enduring. The divine love that reaches out to all of us regardless. The divine love that the expectations of theological hope are all about. And so we return to Mole and Ratty feeling rather sorry for themselves before the humble Christmas repast of sardines and the remainder of a German sausage. And in the midst of this, they hear that song that tells them that even they are included in the love that is nothing other than the divine, the love whose nature is revealed in the Christ child. And the sign to them that this is so is that it was their humble kind that was granted the great and unrepeatable privilege of being the very first to proclaim the good news of Christ's birth. All this about the animals stands. But even so, we know deep down that all this about Mole and Ratty and Toad of Toad Hole and melodious field mice is not really about little animals at all. These characters are, in a sense, you and me, but portrayed in a way that their vulnerabilities do not lie hidden as ours do, even in times of collective worry and concern. And that we can hold on to the conviction that God does not abandon his people, for he came to us in the child Jesus all those years ago, and that we can so easily imagine God granting tremendous privileges to tiny wee creatures and farm animals, surely tells us loud and clear that God can grant far greater things to you and to me, and that nothing at all that life might throw at us can diminish that promise and assurance of what theological hope is all about. And then they heard the angels tell, who were the first to cry Noel, animals all as it befell, in the stable where they did dwell. Joy shall be theirs in the morning. Take care of yourselves. Let us pray for one another. Let us support one another, especially at this challenging time. And a blessed season of Christmas to one and all. Thank you for listening.